Where do we look after today's sell-off? That is the question that I'm looking to answer for myself and for folks in the Sector Secrets Mastery. And I want to give everyone some insight into how I manage a day like today. Now, first of all, the first thing that we did this morning when we were setting up our trading day for this Monday, September 2, was that we looked for some early opportunities to buy puts into rallies on a 5-minute chart. So we took some quick, nice day trades to the downside with QQQ puts and SPY puts. But what about in a bigger picture? And that's what I'm going to share with you here today. One of the unique things about today was the way in which the Dow, this is the YM futures, was pretty darn resilient, stayed green, stayed bullish on the top tier candles, as opposed to a lot of the weakness we saw in the NASDAQ. But I want to show you a really cool pattern that everyone can put to work, and that's the Darvis pattern. All right. So you can see here on the YM, there is a box. This would be a Darvis box. Let me use my rectangle tool here. There's a Darvis box that has formed, this right here. And when we get into the lower eighth of the box, just kind of roughly in that area, what I'm looking to do is buy long calls or look for symbols that are going to move to the upside based on the weakness of the Dow. But the Dow really is, relative to the red and the yellow candles I saw in the NASDAQ, it's actually a pretty good relative performer. So the first thing I did then was said, look, how do I filter? How do I set up a scenario for something with the Dow with a specific filter of what are the sectors that are weighted in the Dow that can rally if the Dow rallies? So the first place I go to is financials. So what I'm going to do is ask myself, all right, is XLF, MasterCard, Goldman, maybe Morgan, are they moving lower into the support of the daily price movement range? Right, so that's the first thing I'm going to do in terms of the number one sector. And then you can see things like MasterCard. Again, I'd like to see it in the lower eighth of its Darvis, which it did. It might be Morgan. Again, so I'll look for the relative outperformers in that group. Another group that I'll take a look at when the Dow is setting up for a potential buy is healthcare. Healthcare is unique because, yes, it's weighted heavily in the Dow and in the S&P, but it does have a little bit of a defensive quality, meaning the old saying is true, right? If things are crashing, people go buy the stocks that make toilet paper. Well, that's another cute way of saying people look at staples. The things that the companies within the staples, Coke, Walmart, Costco, Procter & Gamble, right? The things that they make are things that people tend to buy regardless of whether the economy is good or bad. Well, healthcare kind of fits into that as well. So XLE can sometimes be a little defensive, and you can see here it's moving higher. Now, one of the things that I do is I also look at weekly charts. So we're already long XLV in our long-term account growth from 130.15. So do I have a setup here for a swing? Well, it's got to get down to about 135 before that happens. So we weren't really weak enough. But what about stocks to keep an eye on this week if we're looking for a bounce in the Dow? Johnson & Johnson, AbbVie, and Abbott would top the list for me, right? So find a strong index or something that has a potential trigger like the Dow off the Darvis level, and then go through those sectors that are likely to move with the Dow. Notice we're not talking about tech or semiconductors, right? Financials, healthcare, energy, maybe transports. Well, energy is definitely one to keep an eye on. If you're looking at XLE, that's Exxon, that's Chevron. I would absolutely look to buy a dip when we get weakness in this sector, whether that be at the sector level of XLE or the individual stock level of XOM or CVX. All right, what about the Dow Industrial Average? Rob, where did industrials play a role? Well, we take a look at industrials from the standpoint of typically things like GE, right, RTX, and Honeywell. So those are names that we'll look at. I have no interest in Honeywell on the daily. Too many red candles, too much heaviness. Okay, what about GE? A little bit more interesting. I've got a Darvis. I've got at least 5 green candles. I'm looking for a bounce in this gray zone of the daily price movement range or the lower eighth of this Darvis range, which puts my levels between, call it 266 and 263.70. Now, from last Friday, I know a lot of you are wondering, Rog, what about TJ Maxx, Home Depot, and Lowe's? You talked about those on Friday for potential buys today. Take a look at TJ Maxx. Relative outperformer, green momentum, green trend, green candles, moving higher on a pretty ugly day. This is what relative performers can do for you. So I'm going to cycle back to some of these. Home Depot, quite resilient. Same with Lowe's. So this is what I mean. If you're following these videos, I just don't want to put out a stock that I like the moment that I'm recording this video for you. I want to put out stocks that are having the higher probability of continuation. And these were three that we singled out from the video on Friday. I did not know we were going to wake up to, chaos and anarchy Monday morning. But look at how resilient relative performers are. And this is why we build the list like we do. And now you've got a really good idea of what I'm looking at for the Dow this week. Now, remember, we've got JOLTS, the job openings number tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. We've got non-farm payroll, the big jobs number that Powell has put in the spotlight since Jackson Hole, coming out Friday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. So there are some more windows for volatility based on these scheduled events, these hot zones that we'll be taking a look at. We'll just continue to fine-tune our watch list for those names that have the best probability of follow-through. All right, so that's a wrap. If you have any questions, as always, I check the questions, answer them myself, leave them below in the comments. Thanks for smashing the like button, and I'll see you in the next update. Hey traders, Raghi from Simpler Trading. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to leave a like and a comment below. And remember, subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll get notified of the next update. And when you're ready to join me for live trading, be sure to head on over to simplertrading.com. I'll see you in the next update.